Chapter 13, the seat of Isis as the Laxzi gene. Why the bull goddess bonds to the serpent. Idea strand 44. Isis gives dead king his heart in middle of earth and fashions him. Idea strand 45. Dead king receives milk of Isis, the lady of provisions. Idea strand 46. Dead king takes eye of Horus or two bonds or two bowls of sacred milk. Milky Way references. Idea strand 47. Isis accompanies dead king in sunbark. Isis conceives king and reassembles Osiris. And idea strand 48. Cream reconciles Horus and Seth and purifies dead king. Objective 8. What evidence is there for the idea that the meta symbol Isis represents lactose metabolism? Numerous references to Isis providing milk for the dead king, suckling a white bull, the Milky Way references, and the sweet white eye of Horus references provided evidence for the idea that Isis represents the lactose nutrient medium. These references point to the operating ancient glycolysis pathway in cells that have pathways for both lactose and glucose energy metabolism. Glycolysis evolved billions of years ago when there was hardly any molecular oxygen in our atmosphere. Both anaerobic fermentation and aerobic respiration start with the ancient glycolysis pathway, which runs whether oxygen is present or not. In aerobic respiration, all steps after glycolysis, such as the Krebs cycle to make ATP, occurs in the mitochondria. The starting point for glycolysis is normally glucose. In anaerobic conditions, the end product depends on the organism. For example, in some microorganisms, the end product is ethanol and carbon dioxide, but in higher organisms, the end product is lactate. Lactose is the predominant sugar in milk. The pyramid and coffin text point to this idea in the countless Egyptian references to the Milky Way and the mother goddess Isis. The deceased claims that he is Horus, the offspring of Osiris, and is born of Isis. He states he is the white bull whom the milk goddess suckled and is at nurse. Perhaps the most convincing connection to lactose metabolism is that Isis is the lady of provisions. Thus, we have the claim in the legend of Ra and Isis that Isis was a woman skilled in words of power who enabled the dead to live, including Osiris. In addition, the text states Horus becomes ruler over Egypt, but by means of the soul Eye, the mistress of the Enids, the lady of all. This idea that the eye or genome of the glorious lineage of Horus is whole by means of Isis is found often, suggesting the eye is nurtured by lactose metabolism. The eye of Seth and the human creation thrives with glucose production, not lactose. Horus, of course, is the son of Osiris, who is born of Isis, or nurtured by lactose metabolism. This brings us full circle because the non-local deceased is one who was conceived and born as Horus, the heir. Additionally, reference to lactose include that the deceased will not travel around because your arm is that of Horus. Your arm is that of the Great One, while the sacred eye, the Lady of Provisions, is powerful. This comes out of Coffin Text 246. So it is that cream synonym basically that reconciles Horus and Seth by providing the lactose medium for the complete eye of Horus. Numerous textual references also emphasize the importance of cultivating or brewing barley. The sugar maltose is used in the brewing of barley. Maltose, of course, points to the maltose transport system or phage lambda receptor site, the lamporin, to be direct. The deceased receives the milk of Isis, which translate to accessing the lactose pathway through the maltose transport system, where a low affinity path exists that does not allow MBP to bind the substrate lactose. Now, we have decoded currently barley cultivation equals maltose transport path for lactose energy metabolism. And now we're at idea strand 42. Isis is soul eye, the sacred eye. And subheading, the eye of Isis. To the Egyptians, Isis represented the Magna Mater, the great creative power nurturing all living things. Nephthys, or Hathor, her twin sister or twin form, and the consort of Seth. Oh, well, they explains that who she was, and she was the consort of Seth. Isis' crown consists of a pair of horns between which is a lunar disc, sometimes surmounted by the throne symbol. Recall that lambda Prophet lodges in the E. coli host chromosome at the site of LAC-Z or B-gal gene. With the prophets inserted here, the LAC-Z operon may be inactivated, resulting in a non-functional galactosidase. With the excision or removal of the prophets, this gene for lactose metabolism is vacated, leaving an empty seat, or so to speak, the empty throne. Thus, we have a possible correlation between Isis's name depicting the empty throne or seat, and the potential for lactose metabolism, which is necessary for the birth of the Horus lineage. The text states, Isis wakes pregnant with the seed of her brother Osiris, saying, his seed is within my womb. I have molded the shape of the god within the egg. Also, the eye of Horus is referred to as the eye of the great lady, and as Faulkner has noted, coming out of the pyramid text 639 and 264. The eye of Horus is always feminine, suggesting Isis and lactose production. Recall that the sky goddess Nut, mother of the gods, and Isis is the sacred eye. Since Isis is representative of the introduction of lactose into the cell, she is present on the bark with the sun god or the proton symport entering the cell to inactivate the lac repressor. The dead deceased god, on the other hand, represents recombinant lambda DNA entering the cell at a double-stranded break, which activates the SOS response, causing the prophets to excise, leaving the gene seat next to the lac Z empty. Along with this idea, the two recombinant combatants, Horus and Seth, are reconciled by cream, that is, the milk sugar lactose. So, with the introduction of lactose into the cell, the text suggests that both arms of the lambda genome are nourished by this nutrient sugar. The goddess bond with the serpent. In the funerary text, numerous drawings depict goddesses controlling serpents or bonded to serpents. The serpent Apopis represents the coiled Lex A repressor protein, enforcing the repression of 42 genes and the activity of the lambda CI repressor protein that maintains the lysogenic state of the lambda prophet Osiris. Likewise, the lac repressor is a coiled molecule suggestive of a serpent. A short review of the operation of the lac repressor protein in relation to lactose production will explain why the goddess bonds with the serpent. The lac gene is only active when the cell encounters the sugar lactose in its environment. Lactose, as the inducer, first interacts with the lac repressor protein. Sometimes a mutation that inactivates the regulator protein causes lac ZYA to be continually expressed by the function of the lac repressor protein is to prevent expression of the lac genes. When the lac gene is induced by the presence of lactose, a membrane component or permase captures passing molecules of lactose and shoves them into the cell. The lactose is then snipped into by the enzyme beta-gal, yielding glucose and galactose. Even small amounts of lactose can inactivate the lac repressor, which binds to the operator, preventing RNA polymerase from transcribing the lac operon gene. Then, when the lactose is present, it binds to the repressor and changes the repressor's shape so it cannot bind to the operator. Once the lac gene is de-repressed, permase is made and inserted in the outer surface of the cell, where it increases the influx of lactose. Researchers have studied adaptive mutation of the lac system in stress or starving cells. Unlike lac plus mutations in growing cells, the adaptive mutations form during exposure to selective conditions, occurring by means of unique molecular mechanisms that require homologous recombination proteins like REC-A, REC-BC, or RUV-ABC. Researchers report that the SOS system regulates adaptive mutation in lac system of E. coli. Efficient lac adaptive mutation requires SOS-induced levels of lac-A repressed functions in addition to REC-A. So adaptive mutation in lac systems occur with the cleavage of the monster lac-A repressor, which we all know to be Apopis, that depresses the necessary gene. Horizontal gene transfer. If words are a reference to the DNA instructions translated from the language of nucleic acid into the language of protein, that is from nucleotides to amino acids, then the words of Isis may represent an insertion mutagenesis of the the lac gene during DNA replication. Horizontal gene transfer, the transfer of DNA from one organism to another, would then provide the mechanism by which lactose metabolism is inserted. In bacteria, it is mediated by transformation, phase transduction, or conjunction. Transformation is the uptake of DNA from the extracellular fluid, and transduction in DNA transfer via bacteriophage vectors. The Amduat specifically states that the deceased make of his transformations, reinforcing the idea again by stating, "Ye are great in your transformations." This idea is also reinforced by the presence of the transformation beetle. Also, the sun god wears the horizontal ram horns through the duat, which may signify horizontal gene transfer. In line with this signification, Isis occasionally wears a pair of horizontal ram horns under her double crown, suggesting the insertion of the horizontal gene transfer of the lac gene. Further, the only goddess on the sunbark is the lady of the boat, who wears a white disk and horns on her head. This goddess is most likely Isis, one of the great Aeneid, a representation of lactose permase, or the gene for lactose metabolism. Lactose permase is an enzyme responsible for transport of lactose from the environment into bacteria. And this may be exactly what is intended by the presence of Isis on the sunbark. A reference to the words of Isis points to the idea of DNA instruction, suggesting that the lac gene is active. The text states, "If these words of power of Isis and those of Set be uttered, a pep shall be turned back and shall be shut up in a mentet, in the hidden place of the Tuat." The Amduat text further states, "Behold, Serket is at the head, a pep, in her Tesu F, place of his deadly fetters about his feet, after Isis hath taken possession of the words of power of Set, for twofold strength giveth their words of power." More support for this view comes from the text of the Medinics stele that states Isis has knowledge how to use her mouth, so no evil comes to the child horse, whose protection comes from the boat of Ra. But what is more interesting is that Isis, as lactose, is also responsible for the destruction of a pet or a pappus, suggesting that efficient lac adaptive mutation may occur with SOS induced levels of Lex A repressed function in addition to Rec A. Composition of lactose. The chemical composition of lactose is oxygen, hydrogen, and carbon, all elements present in the polar cusp of our planet. The best known solar wind composition is He/H, and we're talking about elemental symbols or or abbreviations. But heavy metal elements are also present in the solar wind. The solar wind composition instrument on spacecraft Ulysses takes the three measurements: velocity, energy, and charge. And wait a minute. Okay, I'm sorry. It takes the three measurements: velocity, which is time of flight. Then we have energy slash charge, which is electrostatic the analyzer, and we have a semiconductor of the energy too. So negative, positive, ground. The Ulysses instrument shows good elemental abundance and ionization state distribution data for carbon, oxygen, and neon, magnesium, silicon, and S. And we have iron for both low speed, coronal hole, and transient regimes. Robert Sheldon observed that H, He, C, and O and Fe are also present at the quadruple cusps due to the energy of galactic cosmic rays, or the GCRs, from supernovae. Shock waves from the galactic disk transmit energy to the cusp, compressing it. These energy waves go into the cusp but do not come out. Recall that our model, the Earth bacteria cell, needs iron, which is abundant, and lactose is formed from HCO, which is also abundant. Olento also found that ultra high energy events originate in our own galaxy and may be due to iron nuclei accelerated from young, strongly magnetic neutron stars. These high energy events are magnetic traps of energetic particles created by cosmic ray acceleration due to supernovae explosions. So, the polar area of the Earth's cell is enriched with high energy particles and the necessary ingredients for the hard species, including lactose. For Isis is the milk goddess and the lady of the winds. At this point, we can be fairly confident that we have decoded the Egyptian idea of Isis. So, decoded we have currently, Isis equals the lactose energy metabolism. The seat of Isis represents the lac-Z gene seat where the prophets resides in the host. So you remember that little switch went up and milk comes in or it doesn't come in. So goddess or serpent bonds equal lactose inactivating lac repressor. So we have the feminine eye of Horus equaling lambda genome with lactose nutrient. And finally we have the lady of the winds equaling lactose, which is present at the cusp. The bull and the goddess. It is worthwhile to review the symbolism of the bull and its connection to Isis. Archaeologist Maria Gimbutas, in The Goddess of the Gods of Old Europe, excavated numerous figurines dedicated to the great goddess, the vegetation goddess, the bird or snake goddess, with fewer figurines devoted to the male god of vegetation. Gimbutas found evidence for the great goddess being associated with moon crescents and bull horns. She explains that the bull was initially associated with the goddess, becoming a male symbol through syncretism. To really understand the Egyptian symbolic meaning related to the bull, one must look at the origin of bull worship in Egypt. The worship of the bull in Egypt can be traced to the first historical king of Egypt. Herodotus claims that the Egyptians believed lighting descends upon the cow from heaven that bears the Apis bull. We can associate the cow from heaven with the sky goddess or starry newt, the celestial cow, the sacred eye. Remembering that supernovae explosion seed the cosmos with elements for creation. These sacred Apis bulls born on the stars were mummified and buried in the tombs with a chapel above. As the sacred bull of Memphis, the Apis symbolized the moon, a sign suggesting not only the whiteness of milk, but also the presence of stars. The victorious deceased's hands are full of the milk of bulls, but not when Osiris is inert or in the prophet state. Along with this, the Egyptians connected the god Apis with Osiris. Frobenius notes that The motif of the solar lion, which tears out the throat of the lunar bull, is repeated inter in a intern state in Asiatic and African ornamentation. Thus, we can understand the connection between the lunar bull, Apis, and the inert Osiris. In light of this, what the Amdua is advocating is a chemical reaction or excision of the lambda prophet that would restore the ascendancy of the lunar bull, the magna mater, the production of lactose metabolism for a celestial species, rather than glucose production for human creation. As we shall explore, the Amdua is a journey into a bacteria cell that exhibits the dynamics of a curved black hole while undergoing lysis and protein folding. In this process, Isis represents the ancient lactose metabolism pathway and is on the symbol signifying the entry of lactose into the Earth cell, either by horizontal gene transfer or insertion mutagenesis of the lac gene during DNA replication. Representations of the goddesses bonded to serpents depict the removal of the lac repressor protein from the DNA operator sequences. So, RNA polymerase can transcribe the lac operon's gene, increasing lactose in the cell and empowering a new creation. The presence of ssDNA activates the SOS response, cleaving the LEX-A repressor protein and activating the LEX-A regulon. 42 genes for the new lineage, with some conducive to lac adaptive mutation. Osiris rises that Osiris rises. That is, the lambda prophet Isis vacating the LAC-Z gene site. The lunar bull is ascended and the phage progeny are prolific as the cell takes the lytic pathway. The deceased sun god is transfigured into the hard species. Thus, the Isis and milk references point to the ancient lactose pathway, the Milky Way. The deceased travels, thanks to Thoth, who represents RNA polymerase or the transcription of DNA into mRNA. Lactose provides the ascendant bull nourishment and the lion becomes faint. Plutarch's note that on the upper part of the sistrum is carved the effigy or a cat with a human visage, whereas on the lower part is engraved the face of Isis on one side and the face of Hathor or Nephthys on the other. Isis represents generation and Nephthys corruption, and Plutarch says that the cat denotes the moon. This dual presentation of the sister Isis and Nephthys hinges on the idea that Isis bonding with the serpent or activating lactose production generates the hard species. Nephthys then represents the corruption or degradation of the DNA of the human material form. The white moon is an integral part of the Egyptian funerary text, for along with representing phage progeny production, it represents lactose metabolism, the necessary nutrient for phage production. Isis is production of milk, the Milky Way, the great mother with milk of bulls, the Regina Coli that generates the divine child horse, representative of recombinant phage progeny. A myth about Ra and Isis. Isis preferred gods to men, but really esteemed spirits. She aspired to be mistress of the earth and a goddess as powerful as Ra, but Ra has grown old and he has drooled. When Ra slobbered on the ground, Isis took the earth and slobbered, netting it into a poison dart, a sacred serpent which bit Ra, seriously poisoning him when he passed. The gods of their children could see Ra was doomed, so Isis came with her words of power and breathed life, asking Ra to reveal his name. Ra said he was creator of all, that was human, but Isis insisted that this was not his real name, and the poison went deeper into Ra. Finally, consenting that his name should pass into Isis, Ra hid himself from the gods, and his place in the bulk was empty. Ra then vowed to give Isis his two eyes, and the eye of Horus went forth from Ra's mouth and began to shine. The words of Isis, or genetic instruction of the lac gene, destroyed the poison and restored Ra to life in the same way that her words of power restored Osiris to life. But put simply though, horizontal gene transfer of the lac genes into the cell is one way to provide the lactose medium, resulting in the function of the whole eye of Horus, or the excision of the prophets and the active lytic cycle of phage lambda. So right now we have objective 8 completed. The evidence suggests that the meta symbol Isis represents the lactose metabolism. And just another, then we just looked at that last figure in 13.1, an empty seat of the empty throne is the sign of the name of Isis in Egyptian. So that empty seat sign. So next time we pick back up, we'll be on Chapter 14, Assembling a Family in the Afterlife. Peace, kings. Peace, queens. We out.